Hey, this is Chris Walker with evangelismcoach.org, and here this morning I want to talk with you about a couple of different ideas when it comes to following up on your first-time visitors. Now, you may be making all sorts of efforts in getting first-time visitors to your congregation. That might be finding ways to increase the number of invitations that your members give. It might be that you're actively involved in evangelistic outreach. It might be that your church is actively involved in blessing its local community in order to kind of raise the name of the church and help the community be aware that you exist. Whatever you are doing to get those first-time visitors to come in, the important task for you as the hospitality ministry leader is to find different ways to follow up with those first-time visitors. You see, if they don't come back, the reality is that your church won't grow with that visitor or that visitor's family or that visitor's network of friends. You won't necessarily help those new believers find their place in the kingdom of God. You know, maybe somebody happens to accept your altar call that day, but if they don't come back, your church can't help them grow in their relationship with Christ. And maybe you're reaching out to new movers in the community, someone who has just arrived in your community and doesn't have any friends yet, and so you've reached out to them somehow, maybe through direct mail, or maybe they're simply visiting you because they're checking out a bunch of churches. And the reality is, if they don't come back, well, it's kind of hard for your church to make its kingdom impact. So in this video, I kind of want to go over a couple of different ways to help you think through how your church might want to reach out to those visitors to help them make that decision to come back again. And it all starts with intentional follow-up contact on your part. I've seen statistics over the years that intentionality on your part is part of what helps in your visitor retention rate. It is the intentionality of those steps that you take to help make it easy for that person to come back. And the statistics vary depending on who did the study and when they did the study, but the reality that the study suggests is that some kind of contact within the next 48 hours has been helpful. Whether that statistic is still true, and here in this day and age, I'm not really sure because I've not seen some of the research. But back when that was really studied and highly popular, it really seemed that within that first day or two, some kind of follow-up contact was helpful in the decision to return. So what I want to encourage you to think about is find ways to make your visitor follow-up both highly relational and focused on the guest. So let me give you a couple of different ways that I have seen churches work or do, and how those ways have maybe been beneficial to them. And the first way is that of a visitor welcome packet of some kind, a little folder that you give to your first-time visitor. The reality is that some churches are good at getting contact information so that they can mail them something, but a lot of people are somewhat hesitant to fill out that contact card that first week or maybe even that second week. But if you are somehow able to get a visitor welcome packet into their hands, something that they can take home, something that they can maybe read, those are some helpful tips to prepare. So what can kind of go into that welcome packet? Well, of course, a simple welcome from your lead pastor. But in that welcome letter, it's not so much the position of we are here to serve you as much as it is here's a next step that you can take to begin to know about who we are. And that next step may be an invitation to a pastor's brunch. That next step may be to visit a service project that you all are doing in the community, kind of whatever that next step is. Yeah, that is something that you are inviting them to, maybe the next sermon in the series, maybe to the next outreach that you're doing in the community, or maybe to participate in a volunteer drive for canned goods or whatever the case may be. Just something simple that your visitor can do. That would be in that pastor's letter, maybe some information about your church and maybe a little bit of information about the programming that your church offers. And you may want to think about how to present just one or two programming options in that letter versus all of the programs that you have. So that's number one, is that visitor welcome packet. Number two is to be very clear in giving next steps, maybe in your announcements, given that simple next steps in terms of what you want that visitor to take. Do you want to invite them to a Wednesday night supper? Do you want them to attend a new guest reception? Do you want them to volunteer in the community? Maybe your next step is as simple as coming back for the next part in the sermon series. Maybe it's picking up a free book at the Welcome Center. No matter what your next step is, you want your visitor to know what it is. You want your visitor to not have to guess at what they do. Now, some of that is a little bit of an overlap with the visitor welcome packet, but maybe think about your announcement of, when you stand up to say something like, if you're the first time visitor here today, or the first time in a long time, or maybe a second or third, stop by our welcome center and pick up a visitor packet. That clear next step is what you need to do now in terms of helping make that initial connection with a visitor when they are ready to take that step. Number 3, if you happen to get a piece of contact information from them, such as a mailing address or an email address or whatever the case may be, feel free to mail them a letter that has just one clear invitation to that next step. In your volunteer letter, as mentioned there in the welcome packet, it's kind of the same thing. What is that next step that you want your visitor to take? You might want to say something like, we're glad that you came. Many people have found this church helpful in being their spiritual home, and for them it's a place to serve with their gifts, a safe place to explore and discover their faith. And maybe stressing the fact that it's a place to grow in your relationship with Christ. And we hope that you would take the next few weeks to come back and discover how you can connect with a small group, or maybe connect with a service ministry. And we want to give you the time and space to explore. There's no rush to become part of our family. We want to give you the space and time that you need. So I haven't closed a little something for you, and you as the hospitality leader can decide what it is. Let me move on to number 4. Number 4 is think about a post-service reception, particularly in a smaller church. A little time that is time and space after your worship service is over to provide that context for people to visit. Right now in the church that we attend, there's no time or space for that because we've got multiple services. But in the last few churches that I've helped to plant, they've all been one-service churches, and we were intentional in having a little reception time afterwards. That reception time was one of the most important facilitators of relationships, and that is what helped us to gain new members. It was that coffee hour afterwards that gave people a chance to talk in a more relaxed environment. Now, I had a personal friend that I invited to church. I've been inviting him to church for a long time, and his first Sunday there, he was extremely nervous. And in his nervousness, he was ready to go before the service was over. But as he relaxed and enjoyed the service, he decided to stay with me for the coffee hour, and as members of our church engaged him in conversation, he was one of the last ones to turn out the light. It was that kind of context that enabled him to start making new friends, allowed our church members to start making new friends as well. So you might want to provide some kind of seating space, maybe a few tables. Make sure that you provide quality snacks and items to kind of help create that ambiance, to create that environment, and in your mind, to create that opportunity for those relationships to form organically. And number 5, that would be some kind of meet the pastor reception, and this might be a simple next step to mention to your visitors when you make that announcement. So you might hold these Meet the Pastor events every month, or every other month, or maybe even every Saturday. Or every Sunday when you all meet. So hold them whenever you gather a crowd. You might schedule these within a month, like a big event Sunday, such as Easter or Mother's Day, perhaps Christmas, back to school season. Those type of things. You might want to host it near that for some of your churches that have a higher number of visitors on those particular days. And my suggestion would be to schedule them after church to avoid conflicts with either small groups or other activities. But you've got to decide within the life of your congregation what makes sense. But in that meeting, that's a time where the pastor can share the vision of the church, what the church is about, the mission of the church. And this is where other newcomers can kind of meet each other and begin to form those relationships. You can share what is the next step to getting involved in your congregation. This may be where you would talk about your membership and core beliefs, or suggest the membership class. In one of the churches that we attended, this little Meet the Pastor's breakfast was done the first Sunday of every month. It was a home-cooked breakfast, and all of the visitor contact between our first visit and that meeting was all centered around the one next step, which was coming to the pastor's breakfast. It was at the pastor's breakfast that the pastor introduced more about the church, some of the leadership team, different places to get involved, and there was And while, I learned later the church had a multitude of programming, the pastor was only focused on the membership class and a recovery class, grief share class for those who were mourning the loss of a loved one. And those are really the three options. And that was part of what helped relationships form in that particular congregation, because the next steps were simple. The sixth and final way I'll do in this particular video for churches that still do it, that would be home visitation. And the reality is our culture, at least in the United States, has changed a lot, and people don't ring doorbells anymore. They text that they're in the driveway. Home visits are often unwanted, and so, but there are certain regions of the country within the United States where this is still a reasonable practice and a practice that can be done well. And the common tips in making home visits that I would offer to you is to make it short. And have it take place within a day and a half or so of the event, maybe even the same afternoon if possible. And make it brief. Don't even bother going into the house. Just make it brief. Say, hey, we're glad you're here. Drop off some kind of cookies or bread or whatever the case may be. The goal is simply to appreciate the visit and leave information about the church. That's it. Invite them back for a return visit. Again, it's a reflection of our cultural shift that has happened, at least in the United States, that there's not a whole lot of visitation that is going on. And if you wanted to help make this visit, you could deliver a gift bag, or, maybe print out a directional map so that your teams can kind of know where to go, and, maybe even train a volunteer to simply say, hey, my name is Chris, and I'm from XYZ Church, and, we're not coming in, we just wanted to come by and say thank you for visiting our church. Here's a nice little gift. Now, all of these are different ways that you can follow up, and, for some of you, you're probably rebelling already against the idea of a home visitation, and that's perfectly fine. Just recognize that in other parts of the country that is something that still works. I've got a product on my website that you might be interested in that will help you to more strategically think through some of the next steps that you might want to take in your visitor assimilation program. It is a recorded webinar, so it means that it's an online class that you can download instantly. It's a narrated PowerPoint, just to kind of walk through and answer some questions and kind of present some strategies that are working now in visitor assimilation, in helping your visitors take the next steps to find a friend. You can find the link to that webinar here, down below somewhere. And I would encourage you to get that and allow that to stir your creativity more than this video would. Allow it to stir your creativity as you think about how your particular congregation would help a newcomer make a friend, because after all, that is the goal. That is the goal of your hospitality ministry. Help that newcomer make a friend and become part of your congregation. Other benefits will follow. They can find faith in Christ. They can grow as a disciple. They can get involved in your mission program. But none of that can happen unless they continue to come back and build organic relationships within your church. This has been Chris Walker with Evangelism Coach.